Well, hello everyone, Texie88 here and welcome to another board game related video. And now we're taking a look at Gears of War, the board game, published by Fantasy Flight Games in a licensing deal with Epic Games, the rights holders to the famous Gears of War video game franchise that began in late 2006. Set on the planet Sarah, it follows four characters: Marcus Phoenix, Dominic Santiago, Augustus Cole, and Damon Baird. And they're up against what are known as the Locust Horde, who are a horde of various different kinds of beasts that dwell under the grounds of the planet Sarah. So this game came out in 2011, so 5 years after the first video game came out, and is primarily based on the contents of what was in the first and second video games. Even though Gears of War 3 came out in 2011, sadly there's nothing from that in this, which is a bit of a shame, as there were some quite cool weapons and other things in that which would have been nice if they could have been included in this, but such is life. Here's the rule book, and luckily it's one of those where there's a quick rules reference guide on the very last page. And goes into the component list on the first page, so you get an idea of what's supposed to be in there. This is a dashboard card. You'd have up to 3 different variations of locust enemy there, and you'd be told by letter which kinds to spawn. And these would have 3 different packs of cards: one for weapon pickups, one for locust AI, and one for the order cards for the COG members. So for those who aren't familiar with the video game franchise, COG is an acronym for Coalition of Ordered Governments, and the 4 characters that I mentioned earlier are members of the COG. And here we have several double-sided floor tiles. As you can see, some of them have emergence holes on them, some don't. And a key component of the original video games is that makes great is that there was a lot of use of cover, and that has been retained in this board game adaptation. And whenever you see a question mark like that, that usually means there's some kind of equipment that can be activated. What it is depends on the mission in question and the floor tile it's on. Sometimes it's just the ability to get more ammo. Sometimes it's the ability to get another weapon. Sometimes it's the ability to get more grenades, that kind of thing. But what it is depends on the mission you're doing. So there are 17 different double-sided floor tiles, and you're told whether to use the B side or the A side, depending on the map you've been asked you're doing. These are the cards that represent each and every one of the floor tiles, both sides. So there's a separate card for, say, 17A and another one for 17B. Here, for example, is the one for 17B. And here's an example. 17B has one of those question marks on it, so that's In this case, that would be a chance for the player who was in the square, the area containing the question mark, to discard this card to draw 2 random weapon cards from that dashboard I showed you a few moments ago, and you'd keep one with 2 ammo tokens and discard the other. And when the area is, this particular area is first set up, do you remember I said that there were letters corresponding to up to 3 different types of enemy? Well, you'd spawn enemies depending on the letters shown and depending on the number of players playing. So as this is a cooperative board game for 1 to 4 players, if you were playing by yourself on the floor tile 17B, at the very start, you'd be spawning just one of the enemies of type B, as indicated on the dashboard. Another card will tell you what actual adversaries A, B, and C represent. If you were doing a 2-player game, there'd be 2 types of enemy A on the emergence hole or emergence holes. Some of the floor tiles have more than 1 emergence hole. If you're doing 3, it'd be type A and B, and if you had 4 players, it'd be 2 of type A and 1 of type B. So that's how those work. These are the cog order cards. At the start of the game, each player would have usually 6 of these to start with, and they'd get to play at least one of them during their turn, and they'd simply follow the instructions there. If there are multiple bullet points for things like this one, then you must do them in order. And if you're playing solo, you completely ignore any that have this 2+ in the bottom right corner, as these cards the cards with that on can only be used if you've got 2, 3, or 4 players. If you're playing solo, they can those cards cannot be used. So just the ones that have 2. So if you do come across those and you're playing solo, you'd simply put that back in the box and draw another card which didn't have 2+ in the bottom right corner. Now, don't confuse that with 2+ in the top left corner. That's completely different. And when it comes to things in the top left corner, if a locust is about to attack you when it has its AI turn, a player can discard an order card from their hand. This one allows that particular player's character to get 1 attack in on that enemy and potentially defeat it before it has a chance to attack it. Whereas discarding one with a +2 in a red box in the top left corner allows them to roll 2 additional defend dice on top of the usual rules. But that has to be done before the locust in question attacks. This arrow here is follow, and that's the only one of those that's not dealt with during the locust AI step of round. What that means is if another player's character, if you have a card like that in your hand, and another player's character either starts on or goes through the area that has your character in it, then you can discard a card with that symbol in the top left corner to follow that particular character and go to wherever that character finishes up. That can be quite handy if you've got a lot of enemies around you and you're running out of health and you want to be able to follow someone who's going through your area, so you can join them and potentially get yourself out of a very difficult situation. But the downside is that each one of the cards in your hand also represents your character's health. and if any damage you take takes you beyond the last card in your hand. So losing the last card in your hand by itself would not be enough to cause your character to be bleeding out, aka down but not out, aka DBNO. But it's if the health loss takes them beyond that, that's when that becomes a problem. And if at any point all players' characters are DBNO, then that's an instant failure of the scenario. As it's a cooperative board game, either all players win or all players lose. And the other cards that were kept in with those order cards, these different cards for the different stages that are within each of the scenarios that are towards the end of the rule book I showed you a moment ago. Anyone who's playing this for the first time is advised to do this emergence one first, because that's the simplest of them all, and it helps them to get used to the core mechanics of the game without having anything too difficult to worry about. And those would be placed on the mission deck section of the dashboard card I showed you earlier. Some the small cards I showed earlier, which represent the different floor tiles. Some of the other missions have a second and third step requiring some cards to be placed on there, which would lay out more floor tiles. But this emergence one doesn't do that. There's literally only the first set of floor tiles. So those would be the floor tiles shown there would be the only floor tiles used in that whole section. See, there's level 2 locations, none. Level 3 locations, none. If there were locations there, then the requisite floor tiles would be listed, and the cards representing those would be placed face down in any order on the 2 for level 2 and 3 for level 3. But obviously, because this only has level 1 locations, that wouldn't apply for that one. And the other cards go in the order shown there: 1, then 2, and it lists, each such card lists special rules, and you'd flip when the situation shown under flip when has been revealed, and then you turn the card over and follow the instructions, and then go on to the next section, and you'd flip that when everything on that had been dealt with. That's a very simple way of doing it. And there's even a horde mode in this, and rather than having first, second, and third location cards section, there's just 4 different difficulty settings: casual, normal, hardcore, and insane. At the time of recording this video, which was on the 19th of April 2026, I had my first ever attempt at the normal difficulty horde mode. It's advisable to only do the horde mode if you're comfortable with all of the rules, because those are better suited to more experienced players. So this here contains I've kept a whole bunch of weapon cards in there. Some of these are starting weapons, and some of these are weapons that you can potentially pick up later. So there's the famous Lancer assault rifle. That's an iconic weapon in the Gears of War franchise, and you'll see that there are 2 different numbers representing the number of attack dice depending on what kind of attack you're doing. The lower number before the slash is a normal attack, and the other one is an overkill attack, which allows you to roll more dice, but you're forced to expend one ammo token. If you do this here are some ammo tokens. So you normally at the start, any of the weapons that you start with have a set number of these ammo tokens and placed on top of them, unless the weapons instructions say otherwise. You can't do any kind of attack with that weapon if you have no ammo tokens associated with it. So here's that the number there is the range. That doesn't necessarily mean that's maximum number of areas that you can areas away from the area of the floor you're in that you can fire to before you're either out of range or have to add defend dice to what you're trying to shoot at, depending on the weapon. I mean, some weapons such as the bolo grenade and the Nasher shotgun do not allow you to shoot beyond the indicated range. So Nasher shotgun, this weapon cannot be used to attack figures more than one range away. So that is the maximum range. If they're 2 or more areas away, you cannot use that weapon. And you'll also notice that there's the famous Gears of War Crimson Omen logo on every weapon. This is because one side of each attack die has a Crimson Omen on it. We'll see the dice in it shortly, so don't worry about it. And if you roll at least one Crimson Omen, whatever's listed there will take precedence if you decided to pick this particular weapon to attack an enemy with. And you can only attack one enemy with a weapon unless the weapon's instructions on the card say otherwise. You also notice that the bolo grenade and some of the other weapons have naught in the normal attack. That means you cannot do a normal attack with them. You can only do a kind of attack that forces you to lose, in this case, a grenade token. There are some separate grenade tokens which are the similar shape and size to these ammo tokens. Here's a torque bow, another example of a weapon that you can't do a normal attack with. So that's the weapons, and these are the ones that would be shuffled and placed face down on the weapon card slot on the dashboard. And if you had a chance to pick up a new weapon from one of those equipment question marks on a floor tile, then usually the rule of thumb is that you'd pick up the top 2 of these and get a chance to look at them and keep the one you want, as well as give it 2 ammo tokens and discard the other one. And when you flip over one of those, they look pretty much, they've got similar information to what you'd have seen on the double-sided slash starter weapons, such as the cards I showed you some of a few moments ago. This is a line of sight ruler. If there's any doubt as to whether or not you've got line of sight between either you or the or this symbol on a piece of cover, whenever either you or a suitable locus character is in cover to the other end, this is how you can use it. So basically, if neither the attacker nor the defender is in cover, then any part of their sectors are divided by these rough-edged long lines. So this is an area, this is an area, this is an area, and this is an area. And these black lines represent walls. under no circumstances can you ever trace line of sight through a wall. So if you cannot trace an uninterrupted line from, if you're, so as I was saying, if the attacker and the defender are not in cover, then they have line of sight as long as any part of their area can have a straight line drawn between it and any part of the other character's area without crossing a wall line. So for instance, if an attacker was there and wanted to attack something that was in this sector, it couldn't, because there's no way you could trace a straight line from anywhere in this area to anywhere in this area without crossing this wall section. So therefore, no line of sight traced. This just helps in situations where it's not as obvious. It might sometimes be on other occasions. And these are the 4 protagonists. There's Dominic Santiago, Damon Baird, Marcus Phoenix, and Augustus Cole. All of the characters start with 6 of those order cards shown you earlier, with the exception of Marcus, who starts with 7, and his maximum hand is 7 accordingly. And this bit here tells you that particular player's starting weapons, in this case the Lancer, assault rifle, snub pistol and bolo grenade. So for Marcus, the Lancer would have 3 ammo tokens, snub pistol 1 ammo token, and they'd have 1 bolo grenade token. I'll show you the bolo grenade tokens in a minute. These are the special abilities for the character in question. And this is this number in the red square is the number of defend dice that this character's core defense would be. In this case, 1 red die. In fact, all of the 4 characters roll 1 red die as their base, and this can be affected by things such as playing a card with an order card with a +2 in the top left corner if they're about to be attacked, or things like being in cover. These are some locked door tokens and some double-sided tokens. This side would be used if you used a bolo grenade to seal an emergence hole, and this side can be used if the instructions for a particular scenario ask you to add an emergence hole to a particular floor tile where normally there isn't one. These, you can see these are the grenade tokens that I showed you earlier. So those would be given for the character starting grenade, and there are also 4 of these quick reference guides that there's enough for all 4 players to have them. They're double-sided. One side shows a player's turn, and the other side is a rundown of the symbols in the top left corner, the reaction abilities, which I already explained when I showed you the order cards earlier. Although if you're playing by yourself, the follow, because there isn't anyone else that you can follow in the way I described earlier, you could if you're playing solo, you could simply use this to move 1 additional area, because there'd be no one else to follow if you're playing by yourself. Now, these are the attack and defend dice. There are 5 black attack dice and 4 red defend dice. So the defend dice, some of the sides are blank. In fact, 3 of the sides are blank. 2 of them have 1 boom shield symbol on them, and one side has 2 boom shield symbols on them. So I'll just put the defend dice out of the way, and the attack dice. There are 5, of which there are 5. One side is blank. Three sides have 1 bullet hole on them. One side has 2 bullet holes, and the last side has the Crimson Omen logo. Remember, I said that if a cog player is using a particular weapon, the bit at the bottom has some special rules if at least 1 Crimson Omen logo is rolled, and what it does depends entirely on what it says at the bottom of the weapon card, such as the examples I showed you earlier. And there are 5 of those. And this bag here contains some bits and bobs for the Locust. The cards with this symbol on them are the Locust AI cards. Unless an order card played says otherwise, after a player had played an order card, at least one of these would be drawn, and you'd simply follow the instructions on it. And there'd be an if, a conditional thing here, and an otherwise if you could not entirely follow what's in the conditional area. Sometimes you might be asked to draw a new AI card, sometimes not. You literally just follow the instructions on the card. Some of them are general and affect all Locust types, and others are for specific Locust types, such as this one, which only affects wretches that are on the board, if there are any, and it tells what happens if there aren't any wretches. In this case, draw a new AI card. So if you're asked to draw a new AI card, you'd simply discard the one you just picked up and draw a new one, until you eventually came across one that allowed you to even partially follow its instructions. So then those are simple enough, and these are the profile cards for each of the types of enemy there are. So as I showed you, an enemy AI card for the wretches. Here's an example of the wretches profile card, and simple enough. This is the type of enemy it is. A picture giving an idea of what it looks like. So if you're not familiar with the video game, you've got an idea of which of the models to pick, which in this case would be one of these, as this is one of the wretches. And what's in here tells you what happens if they were if during an attack they roll at least 1 Crimson Omen. This is this number in the red square, just like it was on the cog profile cards, is the number of base defend dice this particular one rolls. This is how many health points a wretch has. If there's this symbol, then if it activates, and if there is if its movement, if it does any movement, takes them to an area where there's a free cover space available, then it will take cover. And this just tells you how many attack dice the monster in question rolls, in this case 2. And here's another example of another enemy. This is a more powerful one. As ever, it's got what happens if a Crimson Omen logo is rolled. This one has 3 defend dice as its base defense roll, and 7 health points for the Berserker. If an enemy profile card has this symbol on it, then it means you cannot use the Lancer's Chainsaw Bayonet attack on it. And because it doesn't have that take cover symbol, it can never take cover, whether it's in an area with available cover or not. And the Berserker rolls 5 attack dice. And if there's any special abilities, they'll also be listed, separated by a line from the bit that's done whenever a Crimson Omen is rolled. And inside that, you've also got some partially hurt tokens. In the case of the Berserker, there's a 5 and a 3, so depending on how much damage was done to it will determine whether you did the 5 side or the 3 side. And that would just be placed underneath the figure in question, and there are some other similar ones for other enemies. And with the exception of the Berserker, the hurt enemy tokens, when an enemy is defeated, whether it was partially hurt first and then defeated or killed outright, if it was partially hurt and then defeated later, then this tile that was underneath the model after it was removed would simply be flipped over, and if it showed a weapon, then that would stay in the area where the enemy died. So potentially a player could pick up the weapon depicted and get 2 ammo tokens for it accordingly. Or if it just had a cross, then nothing special happens and that comes off the board and is put to one side, and until all of the ones for that particular type of enemy had been used up, and then they'd be refreshed, shuffled and cycled through again. The only type of enemy that doesn't have a wound token for it is an enemy called the Ticker. This is because it only has 1 health point. The Tickers only have 1 health point, so they don't need them. Here's an example of a Ticker. Speaking of which, now I've shown you, I'm going to show you the models for the different kinds of enemies and the heroes. Here's one of the boomers. Although in the Gears of War 2 video game, another enemy called the Grinder was introduced. Although grinders are catered for on one of the enemy info cards, there's no separate model for them. The cards simply ask you to use the boomer enemy AI cards in the boomer model, which is a bit of a shame. Personally, I would have preferred it if they could have had proper dedicated grinder models, but that ultimately didn't happen, so not much you can do about that. And here's a Cantus. Here's a drone. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, here's a wretch. Here's a Theron guard. And here's the mighty Berserker. And there are also these door standees. If there was an exit to an area, you'd normally put one of those there. And you see from a floor tile, there's an entry point to every floor tile and an exit point which has a door on it. In this case here, can you see where this wall stops? So if there was another floor tile to go onto from here, then its entry area would be placed next to it, and if there wasn't, then one of those door standees would be placed there so that it was clear where the exit was. And the floor tile which wasn't connected to whose entry area wasn't connected to a floor tile in that way would be where all of the cog members start unless instructions said otherwise. And talking of the cog members, the only thing left now is to show you their models. So this here is Damon Baird. Here's Marcus Phoenix. Here's Augustus Cole. And last but not least, Dominic Santiago. Although it has to admit, I would have preferred it if Dominic Santiago could have been made a bit more distinct from Damon Baird. Unless you look really carefully and see that Baird's character has these goggles, whereas Dominic doesn't. The two can be a bit hard to tell apart and very easy to get muddled up, whereas the others are more visually distinct. Given that Dominic Santiago is the only one that starts with a Nasher shotgun instead of a Lancer, there's part of me thinking that it might have been better if his model could have been holding the Nasher shotgun instead. All four of the models have them holding the Lancer weapon. In the case of this particular board game, because of that, it would have made the two. It would have made Dom's character model a bit more distinct from that of Damon Baird, without having to look to see whether or not the character in question has the goggles that makes it clear that it's Baird. I mean, this one doesn't have the goggles or them, whereas this one does. Yeah, so it would have been nice if those two models could have been a little bit more distinct from each other to make them less easy to get muddled up. But so that is an overview of the contents of Gears of War, the board game, published by Fantasy Flight Games in 2011, and based on elements and weapons that were in the first and second video games. As I said, it would have been nice if there could have been, if it could have been released after Gears of War 3 video game had come out, as there are some other interesting things that could have been added to it then, but alas and alack, that's not what ultimately happened, so we got what we got. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to catch you on another one soon. Texie88 out.